Alright, hey guys, this is first tutorial with Tech Tyro. I'm Riley Miller. I'll be your Illustrator connoisseur here, kind of showing you the ropes on the ins and outs and design practices for Illustrator. This first video is just going to be about interface and an introduction to tools. I won't go into too much detail about them, as in further demos I'll be using more of the tools and explain them more as I go along. So this is just a quick recap of everything you see on the screen. First off, this is Illustrator CS6. I normally work off CS5, but there's no huge difference. It's just layout, and they tweaked a couple other controls. Other than that, I use a Wacom Intuos 4 for all my drawings. If you're a person using just a mouse, though, it's still the same thing, point and click. Just if you're doing freehand sketches or anything with pressure, it really helps to have your own Wacom tablet or a tablet of some sort. So getting started here, if you wanted to check out the preferences, you can get a general idea for under the general tab of what you'll be looking at. This is a lot of back end and a lot of jargon that Illustrator or Adobe uses to talk about their programs, but the main things you want to keep your eye out for is kind of like how you want to see your anchor points when you're working with anchor points. I'll talk about those more. What color you want your things to stand out as, so if you want them to be, instead of blue, maybe green, because that looks better, or you see that better, it doesn't get in the way. And here, if you want to change your interface. So for CS6, they normally, or CS5, it's normally in white, but what they did here with CS6 is allowed you to make it darker, so it works better if you tend to work in the dark or do most of your illustrations then. It's not so hard on the eyes. Medium dark's okay for me, I'm not too picky. But opening up a new file now, when you start off a new file, you'll be popped up with this guy. You can allocate whatever file type you want to use. These are just some templates that they've set up for various projects that you could do. All in all, though, I usually set my stuff up within inches. Thinking about pages, a normal letterhead is 8.5 by 11. You can orientate it up and down, left and right. And change the color mode too. For big time prints, you'd work in CMYK, but when you're working on the computer, some things can go wonky if you put it into a JPEG. If it's still in CMYK, it might reverse colors, it might come out undesirable, so you can work in RGB. If you do use your project in CMYK, it's a quick fix. You can change it just under the File tab or the Edit tab, and even cross it over into Photoshop and switch your file over to an RGB instead of a CMYK. I like to work in 380 or 300 ppi. That's just the highest resolution, and comes out better in the end, so you don't have to worry about finishing a project and then it's too small if you go to resize it. That being said, Illustrator is a vector file or a vector-based program. So for vectors, the difference between Illustrator and Photoshop is that vectors you can resize, so it's great for logo work, or if you're doing any kind of designs that you need to have in various sizes without any distortion or loss of quality. Vectors are really handy on that. On the other hand, for specific details, if you have a size that you're doing, pictures or anything, that's what Photoshop really works best at, and that raster sizes the image, so it kind of locks it in at that quality. You zoom in though, it gets pixely. If you zoom out, it might distort too. All depends on how big the picture is. So anyways, I'm going to start this off. Here's your layout. If you pick the layout and it's not the right size or you need to change it, this little handy button here is your frame, artboard tool. So you can change the size right up here, click of a button, make it a square instead, or flip it around so it's top up. A quick cut to fit your whole screen in. If you're looking at it and your artboard doesn't fit on your full screen. If you double click the hand tool, zooms out to fit. So going down the line here, we've got the selection tool, which is great for just selecting any kind of object. You're not focusing on specific areas. We've got the direct select tool. The direct selection picks out anchor points and other fields that you'd be working with as you're doing your design. So that's more focused on segments of your objects. The magic wand, same idea as in Photoshop. If you use Photoshop, select a color and it selects all the colors on that page. So if you're working with blue objects and green objects, but they're all meshed together and you just want to pick the blue ones, magic wand works great. This is the direct lasso, so instead of just having a box selection, you can use the lasso and select any area you want. It selects the object there. We've got the pen tool. Pen tool works perfect for precise anchor point placement, and an anchor point is really just like two ends of a line or points on a triangle. You can add as many as you want and work with pulling them and reforming certain shapes however you want. It's an open-ended tool to morph your objects. Going down the line here, we've got the type tool. The type tool works great because it's all in vector, so you can resize your objects as much as you want, distort them, and they keep their quality. When you enter the type function, you get this array of options up here, and this is really just normal paragraphing and alignment tools. You've got your sizes, you've got your styles, and you've got your font faces. Over here, this is based off size, so you can resize how you want your box to fit. If you need a specific size of box and don't want to focus on font size, you can practice using X and Y values here and shaping it however you want for your project. Moving on, we've got the line tool, and this just deals with specific lines or various types. If you're wondering how I did that there, any tool on the side here with a little arrow on the bottom right, if you hold down on that tool, it opens up a larger option for similar tools. So if I do that here on the type tool, there's different kinds of type tools, and same goes for the pen tool. One sec there we go. And you can add anchor points, you can take anchor points away and convert anchor points, so I'll get more into detail on further projects for that. So for the line tool, it's cut and dry basically. You can draw as many lines as you want. If you're worried about them not showing up, they're still there, there's just no color applied to them. That's moving up to here. We've got our fill and we've got our line colors. The difference between the two is one fills an area space between 3 or more anchor points, and the other fills the line, so the connection between the anchor points. So add a black color, the lines show up. If you use your pen tool and expand upon it, you can now add your fill color, and that fills in the rest of the area. You've got your brush here. This is your normal brush. When you use a Wacom tablet or any other device that helps you draw pressure sensitivity, you can edit the options by double clicking on the tool and playing around with the prompts that it gives you here. Fidelity and smoothness is based off of how you want your drawing to vectorize your movements. Just depends on how smooth you want your brush strokes to be, or how true to form you want your brush strokes to be. There's other fill brush strokes keep them selected after you're drawing. You can keep a trail of selected brush strokes. Fill new brush strokes that just adds a fill color to them instead of just using the line. And edit selected paths. As you draw, if you're within 12 pixels, or you can edit that if you're within 11 pixels of the last drawing, it adds on to it. Kind of finicky, and I don't tend to use that. But anyways, that's the back end of the paintbrush option. Here we got the pen tool. Same idea. If you double click it, it gives you the exact same options here as you would with the brush, but it really just draws out lines. And this is where the add-on feature comes to, and it's really good for just making quick sketches when you're lining up a project. Next, we've got the blob brush. The blob brush is my favorite because not only does it create true to form shapes, but as you draw, you'll notice that the shapes connect, and it fills the area and draws lines on the outside. So it's way easier to morph a specific area instead, as you would with a normal brush here. It's just connecting points. So that's the major difference between these two. Moving on, we've got the erase tool. Erase really just works with any shapes. You've got various kinds of erasing functions. So if you bring up the erase tool, it can cut shapes apart. Or if you have just line segments and you use the erase tool on it, it cuts that line to the next anchor point. So adds 2 anchor points instead. Yeah, you can get around playing with that and experiment as much as you'd like. We've got our rotate tool, our scale tool, width tool, free transform. These are all ways to change your shapes. So with the shape option, all these are ways to manipulate your objects that you have on screen. So the rotate flips it around, scale tool scales it uniformly, the width, same idea, and we've got the free transform, so that adds a box around it as you would with Photoshop. I won't get into the shape builder perspective grid just yet. Basically what that does though is it gives you guidelines so you can set up true to form work and 1-point, 2-point perspective kind of pieces. Down here we've got the gradients. So for the mesh, you create points within an object and you can color specific areas. It can get a little finicky and really complex when you get into it, but it's a good thing to play around with and kind of test your areas on how comfortable you feel with it. On the other hand, then there's the gradient tool, which is straightforward for doing normal gradients on an object. Draw and place. If you're going to play around with gradients, you've got your gradient options here. See which colors you're using. I'm just going to select that color. And now you can edit, tweak just how big the gradient you want or its orientation. Cool thing with Illustrator to play around with. Next we've got the eyedropper. The eyedropper is great if you like to pass on colors to different objects. If you get a specific color swatch and 2 objects, you want this one to be yellow and this one as well to be yellow with a black boundary. You use your eyedropper tool, click there, and now you have a duplicate. The other one we have is the blend tool. The blend tool works to connect 2 different objects seamlessly. So in the idea of a gradient, except you're playing with objects. A quick test here. You can select and trade it over, and now you have almost a seamless transition. It really changes based on the stroke. If you take out the stroke, however, you get a nice effect. Same here. Now it'll be like a continuous object. That's the blend option. Next is a spray paint that comes with putting down stamps or different pictures that you might have in your arsenal. I'll get into that in another lesson, as well as the column graph tool that's for making graphs in Excel style. Artboard, like I showed you, slice. This is all involved with your artboard. The hand tool helps you move around, and if you don't want to click that all the time, the easiest way to do that would be hold down the space bar, and space will let you drag that around. As you hold it down, get back to work, kind of thing. Magnify tool, same thing. If you double click it, zooms out to 100%. If you double click the hand, zooms into actual size. Down here we've got our fill and we've got our strokes. This tells you what colors you have selected. If you want to revert back to normal, which is white up top, black on the back, press D, reverse to normal. This arrow here switches the colors back and forth. So if you're playing around with different colors, you want different colors in front and back, that swaps her. It's your color, gradient, none. These are swatch hotkeys when you're playing around with specific objects. And then we've got our placements. So these work within your layer that you're building on. Our layer board's down here. So right now we have one layer. If we add an object, the one that you can see, that object appears on the layer. And then if you want to add in front, you can add in front. If you want to add behind, let's see if this worked for me. That did not work for me. Draw behind. Well, more on that later. But if you want to add with inside, this one should work. This draws with inside the shape. So now you have a shape that follows true to itself. And you can resize it as much as you want, they'll stay the same. I think you have to have it selected. So if you want to select this and draw behind it, you can do so. There we go. Now you have an object behind an object. If you're playing around and you're just in normal draw mode, you don't feel like switching behind ideas, and you want to move one object from the back to the front, quick short key is Control right bracket brings it forward, left bracket brings it back. If you hold shift, brings it to the top, and same with holding shift, left bracket brings it to the back. If you don't like using hotkeys and you'd rather point and click or see where it is, you can tweak that up in the Arrange tab here. This lets you move your objects within your specific layer. One way that can get a little confusing though is if you're working in two layers and you have two objects within your layers, you're trying to work with it. The layers act separately from each other, so that's the only way you could bring it to the front. More on that later though. Under the Object tab, Object allows you to further manipulate any selected object you have on the screen. You can group it, you can lock it. Lock it allows you to work around that object without moving it accidentally. Grouping allows you to move around the mass selected objects. So if you select all three and group them, that is now a pair. They all work together. The other way around, you can ungroup it. It also shows you the hotkeys, which is nice. And going down, this lets you play around more with the objects. I'll get more into those later though. And there's one more I wanted to show you. hidden underneath the shape builder tool here is something I love to use all the time. It's the live paint bucket, and it lets you specifically drop a color into certain objects if you have those objects selected. See, right now it says you have to select, but once you have those objects selected and use the paint bucket, you can use that group to specifically put colors where you want colors to go, and they all act within each other. Then you can take off your strokes, and now you've got a little composition image. Over on the right here, we've got our swatch library, we've got our color selector. A cool thing they did with CS6 is they gave you a full RGB spectrum. If you're working in CMYK, it'd be the same thing. Your color guide lets you play within certain shades and tints of colors that you're working with. Your swatches is a library of colors that you already have selected, or preset colors. So these are CMYK values, these are shade values. If you want to add new colors to them, you can add new swatches, tweak it however you want, and add those new colors. I'll get into more detail of that in another lesson though. You've got your strokes. This helps you play with appearances of objects. You've got your gradients. Oh, strokes, that just adds the weight of the line. You've got your gradient maps. You can play around with the shapes of your gradients, and your transparency and blend modes. Appearance here lets you further tweak any stroke values and fill patterns that you have on specific objects or a group of objects, as well as graphic styles. This is another feature that Adobe has to kind of give you a hotkey to change shapes in regards to their preset or any other graphic styles that you may come across, like bevel, dusk. I'm not too sure what that does, but there's a wide variety and a library on it if you'd like to add more. This would be an example of their neon effects. This gives you neon borders on all your objects, and etc, etc. Played with the layers and the artboard here. You can save different artboards and so on. So looking at it right now, we've got our fill color, we've got our stroke color, we've got our stroke weight, which lets you make stroke lines on the outside of objects bigger or smaller. You've got your width profile, which lets you change what the strokes look like. We've got the definition, also another way to change your strokes or add extra feature to it. Opacity, graphic styles, and preferences. So in a nutshell, we've got Illustrator pretty much cut and dry here. And I look forward to you guys watching more of my videos. Thanks for watching, and follow more Tech Tyro.